Well, it's a gloriously busy Tuesday on the wide receiver front. Brandon Aiyuk has posted on social media. It looks like he's in New York City. The Jets, speaking of New York City, have released Davante Adams, technically New Jersey. The only team in the state of New York are the Buffalo Bills. Always remember that. The Jets and the Giants play in New Jersey. And a recent report has said that New England is really, really interested in adding a true number one receiver for Drake May. And they have called the Eagles to check in on the availability of A.J. Brown. That is from Matthew Berry, who's had some nice nuggets from the NFL Combine, including the Deebo Samuel trade before it happened. Matthew Berry was saying it's imminent. It's going to happen soon. And it did happen right after that. So Matthew Berry gets his roses. And right now he's talking about the Patriots calling the Eagles to check in on A.J. Brown. And, that all has me circling back to Brandon Aiyuk. A lot of people do not realize that the 49ers negotiated a little secret escape hatch into Brandon Aiyuk's contract. And that escape hatch means that a trade is very, very possible over the course of this month. I will explain, but this all goes back to those acrimonious negotiations last summer. And the 49ers, I think, at the time, became less and less certain about their desire to have Brandon Aiyuk aboard, locked in for the long term. So they wanted to make sure that they could potentially move on from this contract after just a season. That was a tough needle to thread, though, because normally when you give a player a lot of guaranteed money, as the 49ers gave Brandon Aiyuk, you cannot just jump out of the contract without a ton of short-term salary cap damage, because the way it works is you give guaranteed money and it stretches out over the life of the salary cap. But if you trade a player, especially after only 1 year, all of the money that you've stretched out into the future accelerates and hits at once, and it could just flood your salary cap in the short term. But the 49ers have found a way to avoid this, and we can illustrate by taking a look at the actual contract. Here you go. This is what I created at the time of the deal last year. So you've got prorated signing bonus money, you've got option bonus money, and you've got option bonus 2 money. The first two, so the blue shading and the green shading, are the guarantees at signing, or they're the major components of the guarantees at signing. So Brandon Aiyuk had, I believe, 40 to 45 million guaranteed at signing. 23 of that came through the signing bonus, which the 49ers have already paid out. But this is where the asterisk comes into play. This right here, the option bonus, which is worth 22.9 million. It is not due until April 1st. And we're sitting here and it is currently March 4th. Option bonus 2 is not due until next year, but it becomes guaranteed on April 1st of this year. So we are currently in this 1 month limbo period where the 49ers can technically trade Brandon Aiyuk and it won't have that big of a salary cap impact. I will show you the contract that remains for Brandon Aiyuk. It looks like this. What San Francisco did is they paid Brandon Aiyuk to end the standoff last offseason. The $23 million signing bonus was enough to get that done. But because they included staggered bonuses later on that don't trigger until a little bit later this offseason, April 1st, it made a trade financially possible for the team following year one. So right now, this is what remains of Brandon Aiyuk's contract. If the 49ers were to trade Aiyuk at this moment before April 1st, this is what the inheriting team would acquire. It's essentially 4 years, 110 million, 27.5 million per year. Remember, Aiyuk signed 4 years, 120 million at 30 million per year. So I still think that a trade is unlikely, but it is definitely possible. And people need to get this, oh my God, it's financially impossible, out of their head, because it's not financially impossible, because the 49ers literally built the contract so that the green portion here, the green proration, doesn't kick in until April 1st. In fact, there may be a sense of urgency if the 49ers do want to move on from Brandon Aiyuk. There may be a sense of urgency to do it this month because the teal part becomes guaranteed on April 1st. If you want to offload the contract, you want to get it off your hands before more becomes guaranteed, because the more that's guaranteed, the less valuable the contract is, the less flexibility the acquiring team would have. So we really get to find out how this 49ers restructuring is going to work. And I use restructuring as a pun intended kind of word because we talk about restructures with contracts all the time. But San Francisco has followed the same formula for all these years of building the team under John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan. And the formula has started with acquiring and retaining A-list players. I call it the A-list core. Those are the guys that you pay. So every single season, you look at your upcoming contracts, you look at your free agency statuses, you look at your roster, you obviously take inventory of who you've drafted and who you might draft or sign moving forward, but you determine who those central core pieces to the football team are. And the 49ers, because they have brought a lot of good talent into the building over the course of the past 8 or 9 years, they've had a lot of A-list conversations. They've paid a lot of A-list players, from Fred Warner in 2021, George Kittle in 2020, the year before that. Deebo Samuel was an A-lister for a few years. He fell out of A-list status in 2024, so his contract no longer was something that the 49ers deemed financially efficient. So they went ahead and they traded Deebo Samuel to Washington. But Brandon Aiyuk in 2024 definitely fell into that A-list category, and so did Nick Bosa in 2023. So who is going to be the core, the A-list core for the 49ers moving forward? And the question is, does Brandon Aiyuk still qualify? Even though there was a lot of acrimony in the negotiations, he did not come out of the gate strong last year, and then he tore his ACL in week 7. And if Brandon Aiyuk no longer qualifies for that A-list core, we already know that the 49ers have become much more stringent this offseason about who qualifies for the core and who doesn't. That's why they just traded away Deebo Samuel. He no longer qualifies into their A-list core. So if Brandon Aiyuk no longer qualifies into the A-list core, and somebody like Brock Purdy is about to step into it as this major quarterback expense, then the 49ers can decide to move on from Brandon Aiyuk, and they've given themselves the flexibility to do that through this deal. They can move on with draft compensation, assuming that a team is willing to pay that draft compensation, and the ability to maximize their chances of cultivating a new core around the players who they decide to keep as part of that central core of the football team. That's how this recalibration process is working for the 49ers. To throw an extra intriguing wrench into everything, the New York Jets have just now finalized the release of Davante Adams. It has been announced on social media by the New York Jets. And Davante Adams, according to a couple of the national reporters, Adam Schefter and Ian Rappaport, is very, very interested in playing on the West Coast. So as soon as it came to be that the Jets were shopping Davante Adams for a trade this past weekend, I made a video. I said he's probably going to be released because he's due $36 million in each of the next 2 seasons. And Davante Adams at age 32 is obviously not worth $36 million. The Jets would have to eat part of his contract, and New York probably not comfortable with that. So if they weren't going to get any takers at $36 million, they were going to release him. That has now officially happened. And the word is that Davante Adams, who's from East Palo Alto and went to Fresno State, is interested in coming back to the West Coast. So 49ers fans are, putting together the puzzle on their wall. It's like that scene from A Beautiful Mind when Russell Crowe is deciding to put together all the clues. 49ers fans see that San Francisco has said no. Deebo Samuel is not cost efficient. They shipped him off to Washington. They are exploring opportunities to trade Brandon Aiyuk, although it's a little bit more difficult in this situation because he tore his ACL. That escape hatch that the 49ers built in, the one thing that could really derail its viability is an injury. And Brandon Aiyuk did suffer the torn ACL. So, you have this remaining contract for Brandon Aiyuk. And last year at this time, this would have looked like something that other teams would jump on. Cleveland was literally willing to send a second and a fifth round pick and Amari Cooper to pay Brandon Aiyuk around this type of money, even more money than this. But the fact that he's torn his ACL has probably changed the dynamic. You've got those two guys, and now you have Davante Adams interested in playing on the West Coast. Now, $36 million was too rich for anybody in the league to pay Davante Adams. $35 million is the top of the market. That is Justin Jefferson. But where exactly is that Adams number? That's what teams should ask right now. We're going to analyze this. We're going to ask a couple questions. We're going to ask, where exactly is the West Coast discount number for Davante Adams? And is he interested in ring chasing, which would mean a below market rate contract? And it's entirely possible that he is. My question number 3 in this entire saga is he serious about following Aaron Rodgers around? Because that's been something that Davante Adams has been interested in doing at earlier points of his career, including last season when he was traded from Las Vegas to the Jets. That experiment failed, but you cannot fully discount this idea of Davante Adams coming over to San Francisco, even if the Rams or the Chargers might be more likely, because this is one of the great wide receivers of this generation. Again, he's from East Palo Alto. He's still a really good route runner. He may be a little bit past his prime at age 32, but the 49ers, who are into cost efficiency now, if they can get Davante Adams at the right price, just like if they can get Joey Bosa at the right price, we'll see what the Chargers do with Joey Bosa, but there's a chance that he's a cap casualty. The 49ers would consider that the cost efficiency that they're looking for. Again, the 49ers in this entire rehaul that we're watching, this ruthless rehaul that I've been talking about for about a week now, since John Lynch really put words to it last week at the NFL Combine, it does not preclude them from going after big-name players. I guarantee they'll still be interested in Myles Garrett if the Browns are interested in trading him. He's that good of a player. And Myles Garrett has said, I want to trade because I want to win a championship. He hasn't said, I want to trade because I want more money. So they'd be interested in anybody that they could bring in on a cost-efficient contract, and that includes big money players whose production backs up the paycheck. Right? That's the key. The production has to back up the paycheck. Brandon Aiyuk's production did not back up the paycheck last season. And that was even before the injury. I remember the terrible drop against Kansas City. Could have changed the course of that game. Purdy on third down just threw an absolute dime. He was under pressure. I think it might have been Chris Jones hitting him. He was under pressure. He's getting hit. Throws one outside the numbers to the sideline. Might have even been a touchdown, and Brandon Aiyuk just dropped it. We talked about the inefficiency of Aiyuk. We talked about the inefficiency of Deebo Samuel. I mean, we paid tribute to Deebo Samuel's time with the 49ers, but we can't get it twisted. 2024 was not a good performance, and San Francisco thought that the chances of Deebo Samuel getting back to prolific levels, at least with them, were not very high, not high enough for them to justify keeping him around, so they decided to recoup the draft capital. In the case of Brandon Aiyuk, when you look at the salary cap impact that this would have on the 49ers, this actually would cost them a trade before April 1st. When I say it's more affordable than a lot of people think it is, it would only cost them $7.2 million of additional 2025 salary cap space if it would have executed before April 1st. And the dead cap would be $18.4 million. So let me explain how that would work for Brandon Aiyuk by looking at his contract. All of this, the blue beyond the 2025 season. So you got $4.6 million, the proration, 25, 26, 27, 28. That adds up to $18.4 million. 4.6 times 4 is $18.4 million. So all of that has hit the 49ers books, their bank account. Like the money's been withdrawn from the 49ers account and it's gone to Brandon Aiyuk, but it has not yet hit the salary cap. Only $4.6 million has hit the cap. The next $4.6 million is scheduled to hit this year. Then you've got 3 more doses of $4.6 million scheduled to hit in 2026, 2027, and 2028. So if the 49ers move on from Brandon Aiyuk, they would have to owe all of this in the blue. It would accelerate. The $18.4 million would accelerate, and it would hit all in 2025. So that's where $18.4 million of dead money comes. Brandon Aiyuk's current cap hit is about 10 million. So it would be 10 or 11 million, close to 11 million. It would be about 7.2 million on the 2025 cap to trade Brandon Aiyuk now. Meanwhile, even though you'd lose 7.2 million in short-term spending, short-term cap money, you would gain 110 million over the long term. You would clear virtually all of this. All of this contract right here would be off of your books if you're the 49ers. So you all the green, all the teal, and the only part that you'd have paid for would be the orange and the blue. So 22.9 million plus 1.1 million. You'd end up having Brandon Aiyuk aboard for about 24 million in one season. Wouldn't have been a bad deal. The 49ers will have had Brandon Aiyuk for 24 million 1 year. Obviously, the year didn't go well, and you would think they would get draft compensation back. That's something that would be necessary for San Francisco to make a deal. They'd get draft compensation back, and the rest of the deal would be offloaded elsewhere. That's the thinking behind this. And that's where the trade window comes from. April 1st being a key trigger date, because on April 1st, what happens is that the $23 million option bonus right here kicks in, and then the 49ers would have to shoulder a whole lot more dead money, because the $23 million as an option bonus means that the 49ers pay it all at once. It's not base salary. It's not like it comes in on a week-by-week basis. They'd be tethered to that money on April 1st, and obviously that would change a whole lot of things. So when I talk about a Brandon Aiyuk trade window, we are currently in it. Now, up on the San Francisco Standard today, I made my roster builder. The roster builder is a lot of fun, by the way. There it is. The build your own 49ers roster for 2025. A look at the retro spreadsheet. Now, yes, you can use the roster builder to trade Brandon Aiyuk. I give you guys a bunch of different possibilities. The link to this is going to be in the description, and it's also going to be in the chat. I'm going to go ahead and send it to Mike so you can check it out. The winner of this roster building competition is going to win Internet GM of the Year. I'm serious about Internet GM of the Year. You're going to be honored on a show. So this is what you do. You just open the document, you click on copy, make your own copy, and then you have a chance to build your own 49ers roster. So to trade Brandon Aiyuk, you just go over here. You see his current cap hit of 10.7 million. You move it up to 18.4 million, which I just told you guys. It would only be about 7.2 million more expensive for the 49ers on this year's cap. And then you check the box and take a look at that. Checked box means a cut or a trade. That would mean that both Deebo Samuel and Brandon Aiyuk are traded entering this 2025 season. Wouldn't that be wild? Yes, it'd be wild, but it is, in fact, possible, because we currently are in that Brandon Aiyuk trade window. Now, what I said about the Patriots a few minutes ago, this was from Matthew Berry's reporting that they are desperate to bring in a wide receiver one to pair with Drake May. New England was interested in bringing in Brandon Aiyuk last offseason. Obviously, the value has decreased with the torn ACL, but then you have to start asking, how much has the value decreased with the torn ACL? Also, remember that John Lynch at the NFL Combine, when we talked to him about a week ago, said that Aiyuk has a big marker appointment coming up with Dr. Neil Elatrosh, who performed his ACL reparation surgery. So he's going to go down to Southern California. He's going to check in with Dr. Neil Elatrosh, and Lynch said that's happening in a couple weeks. Well, look at the timeline right now. It's March 4th. Lynch said this late February, right? So it was about a week ago. There was still 4 to 5 weeks before the April 1st option trigger date of Brandon Aiyuk's contract. If a couple means 2, as it usually does, even if it means 3, there's going to be a firm update on Brandon Aiyuk's potential return to play timetable that might be handy for both the 49ers and for teams who are interested in trading for Brandon Aiyuk. I think the more information, the better in a situation like this. But you can see why the 49ers might be incentivized to do it, because there's going to be opportunities to rebuild their receiving room in a new way. And you could obviously see why other teams might be incentivized to do it. I go back to this. This is what remains of Brandon Aiyuk's contract. This is what another team stands to inherit. And it is Brandon Aiyuk at essentially an 8.3% discount over the contract that he signed last offseason. And that was with a salary cap that was about 9.1% smaller than it is now. So the price of Brandon Aiyuk, given the contract that teams can trade for, is 8.3% lower than the one that he signed with the 49ers, and the salary cap is 9.1% higher. So you can get Brandon Aiyuk at much more of a bargain. Now, does that fairly reflect the fact that he's coming off a torn ACL? That's for other teams to decide. That's for them to offer trade compensation to the 49ers. And then the 49ers have to determine, okay, is this trade compensation worth it? How badly do we want to get off of this contract? How badly do we want to reconstruct the receiving room? I think in the case of Brandon Aiyuk, it's a little bit different than Deebo Samuel, because Aiyuk is a typical X receiver when he's been healthy, when he's at his best. It's like Davante Adams. He's been a great separator. That's exactly what Brock Purdy needs. Brock Purdy is a timing quarterback. He's an anticipatory thrower. He loves to run around a little bit back there whenever the play breaks down. So he needs guys who can separate downfield. He likes pure receivers. Deebo Samuel is more of a machine for the short game. And that paired really well with Jimmy Garoppolo. Brock Purdy, though, is throwing intermediate passes. He's going deep, and he's extending plays a little bit more often. So guys like Juwan Jennings has been a really good separator for the 49ers, especially relative to his draft positioning. Prime Brandon Aiyuk, 2023, was an excellent pairing with Brock Purdy. It's guys like that. I think Davante Adams would pair really well with Brock Purdy as well. So when you look at Deebo and you look at Brandon Aiyuk, Deebo, that was a no-brainer, I thought, when we entered this offseason. 49ers picked Ricky Pearsall in 2024, and you're saying, okay, who's going to be the odd man out? Because somebody has to be the odd man out. Okay, it was probably going to be Deebo Samuel, because Deebo Samuel was the bulldozer. He wasn't the separator. He was coming off that Super Bowl where he strained the hamstring, and it wasn't a good performance for Deebo Samuel. Wasn't a good performance for Brandon Aiyuk either, but if you looked at whose play probably would age more gracefully, we all said Brandon Aiyuk, because we said, okay, this is your typical X. This is a guy who is not going to take the beating that Deebo Samuel takes on some of those short screen passes when he's playing like a bulldozer. This is somebody who's going to pair with Brock Purdy. What we predicted last offseason was that the 49ers would pay Brock Purdy. They indeed would pay Brandon Aiyuk. They indeed did pay Brandon Aiyuk. And we said they're going to let Deebo Samuel play his penultimate year out, and unless they get blown away by a trade offer, and it sounds like they got some trade offers, but they decided not to move on from Deebo Samuel. And then they would, if Deebo Samuel blew them away in 2024, I'm sure they would have found a way to keep him around if he still stayed as part of that A-list core. But he didn't blow him away in 2024, so they didn't keep him around, and they traded him to Washington. The wrench thrown in by Brandon Aiyuk was that the contract was much more acrimonious than people had hoped. The whole negotiation, right, went through so much mud. I mean, the hold in and the online drama and, the tears at his locker after the end of the season, after the Super Bowl. I mean, some of that you could understand. Some of it just went overboard. And then I think that, it all came to a head after it was signed, and Brandon Aiyuk got up on the lectern and was given his press conference, and he acknowledged that he was sitting on the contract that he signed for 3 weeks. Like that deal had been in front of him 3 weeks. He said, I made it harder than it had to be. And it's like, yeah, you made it harder than it had to be. The 49ers obviously felt the same way. And, big time performance and winning smooths everything over. If Aiyuk had gone out onto the field and performed the same way that he did in 2023, and the 49ers had kept on winning, then, it would have been all water under the bridge. But instead, he came out there, didn't produce much at all over the first few weeks, had one big game. I think it was the game against New England, but generally just struggled. Dropped that pass against Kansas City. Then he tore his ACL, and the 49ers went 6-11. So we go back to why the 49ers built in that trade escape hatch in 2025. And that's where we're at right now. about a month away from that April 1st trigger date. So the ACL and the acrimony questions, those are the ones that the 49ers and other teams are going to have to answer when they determine the willingness to trade Brandon Aiyuk. And it's going to be an interesting month, that's for sure. The 49ers did not shut the door on this. I mean, John Lynch's answer was fascinating at the Combine. We can go back to that from a week ago. I mean, as soon as that happened, I talked about it on the live from Indianapolis as soon as I could. I'm going to find this down here. He was talking about cost efficiency and high cash spend. Here it is. Let's get this up on the screen because that was the clue of all clues from John Lynch about this situation. All right. So asked if it was possible to trade Brandon Aiyuk, John Lynch didn't deny it. He said the 49ers take calls on everybody, which is standard operating procedure. You should. But then he just went off into what, to some might have appeared to be a tangent at the time, but I don't think that it was a pure tangent. I think that John Lynch was talking about the 49ers core and questioning whether or not Brandon Aiyuk was part of that A-list core. We've had high cash spend, and at some point you have to recalibrate a bit. You can't just keep pressing the pedal. But I think there's some good that can come out of it. I think we need to get younger. We're the oldest team in football trying to make a run at it last year. I think it's good to constantly try to get younger. And our draft class last year was a great move towards that. We'll have 4 picks in the top 100. We're excited about adding more youth to the great core of players we already have. Well, guess what else might be able to add on to the 49ers arsenal of picks in the top 100? That's right, another trade. Deebo Samuel netted surprisingly good return for the 49ers. 1 year left on his deal, $17.5 million headed to another team, and they got pick number 148. That is a higher first-round pick. The Lattimore trade sent that pick to Washington. So Washington then sent that pick to San Francisco. It's not a lower fifth-round pick. It's a higher fifth-round pick. It's originally New Orleans' fifth-round pick. So you got pick number 148, and now you have the potential to add yet another pick to the top 100, maybe 2. I don't know how much it would be. But, of course, the 49ers would be interested in such a proposition based on everything that John Lynch said. So we got the first hint last week, and now we'll just have to see where the 49ers value Brandon Aiyuk, see how the cost structure works. I mean, some really interesting financial stuff happening around the league today. I'm going to get into this a little bit later. We saw that Saquon Barkley signed a new deal with the Philadelphia Eagles, and he's the new number 1 at the running back position. Barkley is now up to, I think, $20.2 million per year. Am I right on that, Mike? Is it 20.2 or 20.4 million? Christian McCaffrey had been the number 1 spot at number 19 million per year. Barkley has $36 million in fully guaranteed money. The previous high water mark had been Christian McCaffrey at $24 million in fully guaranteed money. So the Eagles have reset the running back market with Saquon Barkley. And what we're seeing is Philadelphia pour a ton of money into the offensive side of the ball, right? They already paid Jalen Hurts. They have already now paid Saquon Barkley after bringing him in last offseason. They paid Devontae Smith. They paid A.J. Brown. Now you've got New England snooping around, seeing if A.J. Brown's available. It's $20.6 million for Barkley, and number 2 is Christian McCaffrey at $19 million. They paid their offensive line. I mean, big-time investment in the offensive line. But what the Eagles have done to afford all of this and stay cap sustainable is they've gutted the defense, and they've replaced a lot of high-priced veterans like Javon Hargrave, who went to the 49ers with rookie contracts. Cooper DeJean, Jalen Carter, Nolan Smith. They brought in Zach Bond, who was the highest graded linebacker in football this past year. Bond was number 1. Fred Warner was number 2. And they paid Zach Bond like $3 or $4 million this year. He's up for another free agent deal this offseason, so Bond's going to be a whole lot more expensive. But it makes me wonder, are the Eagles even willing to keep him given the fact that they seem to be willing to pay for offense and not pay for defense. So then you ask, okay, what are the 49ers going to do? Are they going to build the same type of situation that the Eagles have? Are they going to cut a bunch of defensive costs and pour money into the offense? I don't know exactly what path the 49ers are taking right now, except for the one of general efficiency. It's like they're just taking an axe right now to the inefficiency around the entire roster, because we've seen the Javon Hargrave presumed post-first designation. That's what the 49ers have said is the plan for Javon Hargrave. That's going to save him $40 million. Last offseason, it was another move to the defense. It was Eric Armstead. That saved them $18 million. So 40 plus 18 is $58 million. This Deebo Samuel move saves them $17.5 million, but that one's on offense. So 58 plus 17.5 is 68. $75.5 million. Kyle Juszczyk, pay cut on offense. That was about a $5 million savings. So that's $80 million saved for the 49ers. And then if you do this with Brandon Aiyuk, that's going to be $110 million saved over the next 4 years. So all of a sudden you'd be talking about $190 million in slashed costs for the 49ers, with more draft picks coming in a couple of these transactions, one for Deebo Samuel and one for Brandon Aiyuk. So, I mean, we are at the very infancy of this 49ers retooling effort, and it is absolutely fascinating stuff to me. And, a lot of times people will say, oh, rebuild. They're not trying to compete next year. You can't say that when you've seen the Buffalo Bills slash massive costs. Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis, their two best receivers, out the door. You can't say that when the Eagles just won the Super Bowl, slashing massive costs across the entire defense. You can't say that when the Rams have been in cost slashing mode over the past few years. Those are just three good examples. And I think that the 49ers were just in this rush to try to kick down the door and win the Super Bowl over the past couple of years. And it got them to the point where they were like, okay, let's spend. And we just throw money at stuff. Christian McCaffrey wants a new deal. All right, we'll throw money there. Trent Williams wants a new deal. Okay, we'll throw money there. What do we do with Brandon Aiyuk? He wants a new deal as well. He's holding in. He was Brock Purdy's number one target in 2023. What do we do? This is a bad situation because Aiyuk is not budging. We need him in training camp, or we need him in uniform to have our X-wide receiver in this season where we want to kick down the door and win the Super Bowl. So what the 49ers did to bring Aiyuk to the table is that they paid him, obviously, the close to the money that he was looking for, but they were able to build the escape hatch that I was talking about. They opened a Brandon Aiyuk trade window after year one. So this is very unusual. Normally, when a team awards a contract the magnitude of the one the 49ers awarded Brandon Aiyuk, you cannot get out of it without massive, overwhelming dead money penalty in the first 2 years. But in this one, the 49ers found this compromise. A lot guaranteed. Let's not act like this is a bad deal for Brandon Aiyuk. I think this is actually a really good deal for both sides, considering the circumstances. I think they struck the right balance. Normally, like for Aiyuk, all the teal over here guarantees on April 1st as well. So by April 1st of this year, this contract for Brandon Aiyuk is going to vest into something that carries $65 million of effectively guaranteed money. I mean, he cashed out big time. Now the question is, who's going to pay these bills? Because I don't think he's getting cut, right? If he's cut, that's financially prohibitive. So the effective guarantees on this deal were very big, but the 49ers made sure that they'd be able to run away from and pass off these effective guarantees to another team, theoretically. The wild card in this whole situation is that he tore his ACL last year. So we're not quite sure what another team would be willing to pay for the remainder of this contract. But the gist of it is that the blue has been paid out, but the green and the teal, the green won't be paid out till April 1st, and the teal doesn't become guaranteed until April 1st. And I consider me very entertained and very intrigued about which way this is going to go. Now, why don't we talk a little bit more about Davante Adams? Because he delivered over 1,000 receiving yards this past season. Everybody's like, oh, Davante Adams, he doesn't have it anymore. He started off on a Raiders team that was inept. The Jets weren't much better when he went over there. But he was able to connect with his old friend, Aaron Rodgers, together again after the Green Bay Packers days. And even though the Jets were, I don't want to use poor language here. There was something of a show. It was a certain type of show in 2025 or 2024. They probably will be again in 2025. Even though the Jets, made an embarrassment of themselves in several different ways this past season, Adams did go over the 1,000-yard threshold. He's 32 years old. This is around the time when even with a superstar, you really start to, scratch your head and say, okay, how long can he keep up playing at a high level? That's why nobody wanted to trade for him at $36 million. He's not a Justin Jefferson type of player. He's not in that situation of his career, but there still is some real worth in Davante Adams. And the whole West Coast thing, it has to color the Chargers intrigued. It has to color the Rams intrigued. And I think it's got to color the 49ers intrigued. Age 32, by the way, 49ers fans know all about a receiver producing at age 32. Why don't we pay some tribute to Jerry Rice? Because Jerry Rice's career was just getting started when he was 32 years old. I'm going to open this up on Pro Football Reference. I mean, this is insane. Jerry Rice's season by season. I mean, we talk about Julio Jones basically, running out of gas at age 32. We talk about Davante Adams potentially slowing down a little bit here at age 32. Look where Jerry Rice was at age 32. That was the 49ers' most recent Super Bowl. That was 1994. 1,500 receiving yards over 16 games that year, 13 touchdowns, 2 rushing touchdowns, so 15 touchdowns. And if you're talking about a Jerry Rice slowdown, okay, at 33, he had 1,848 receiving yards. At age 34, he had 1,254 receiving yards. He got hurt in 97, but he came back. He tore his ACL and came back in the same season. At age 35, I mean, it's absolute insanity when we talk about Jerry Rice. Every single thing that he did in his career is just superhuman. So imagine 35 is 3 years older than Davante Adams right now. Imagine Davante Adams in 3 years tearing his ACL in week 1 and then coming back the same season. It's not going to happen, right? I hope the ACL tear wouldn't happen, but even if it did, he wouldn't come back the same season. Jerry Rice was just built completely differently than any other person to ever put on a uniform in this sport. Age 36, he comes back from a torn ACL and a cracked patella to put up another 1,100-yard receiving season. Age 37, 830 yards. Age 38, the last one with the 49ers, Terrell Owens had emerged as the number one weapon by that point, 805 yards. I mean, the 805 yards is a career year for most people that have ever stepped into the NFL. And Rice is doing that as the number 2 at age 38. So then he's like, I still want to be the number 1 or somebody that gets the ball a little bit more often. The Raiders also had Tim Brown. He heads to the Raiders and he delivers a 1,139-yard receiving season at age 39. He delivers a 1,200-yard receiving season at age 40. I mean, I hope you guys are appreciating how insane this is. And I'm talking about receivers. I'm talking about the Brandon Aiyuk trade window and Davante Adams. But this all has to do everything. Anytime you have an epic receiver discussion, and we do right now, we got like 1,200 of you watching on YouTube, 3,400 of you watching elsewhere. So this is a big show. Any epic receiver discussion has to circle back to Jerry Rice. Those are the rules. I didn't write them. At age 41, Jerry Rice, 869 receiving yards. And then at 42, he played for Oakland and Seattle and had 429 yards. So, I mean, there are guys who dream of making the NFL and logging just one catch. Jerry Rice is a 42-year-old, was delivering 30 catches for 429 yards and 3 touchdowns. I mean, from 32 onward, we could put a little split here. From 32 onward, Jerry Rice had 11,000 receiving yards. From this point of his career onward, like if you're going to compare it to Davante Adams, Jerry Rice still had 11,000 yards and 79 touchdowns left. This, we could talk about GOAT and Tom Brady and Joe Montana and argue about that all day. I think the greatest player to ever put on a uniform is Jerry Rice. There is no other player who statistically did this in the modern era. I know Don Hudson of the Packers back in an old era of football also did some insane things statistically, but what Jerry Rice did, like I just gave you the age 32 to 42 part of his career was better. That was better than almost any other receiver who ever played. And I didn't even include the age 23 to 31 part of his career. So this wasn't supposed to turn into a Jerry Rice tribute show, but again, rules are rules, and rules were followed in this show. The real GOAT, Jerry Rice. Somebody's saying Jim Brown. Didn't Jim Brown quit playing when he was about 30? Jim Brown was already done playing, and Jerry Rice would have still had a good, 14,000 receiving yards to gain. There's just no comparison. Explosiveness and longevity. The guy right behind me, Frank Gore, or Joe Montana's behind me too, but the guy right behind me with the big jersey, Frank Gore, he had 16 seasons and 16,000 yards, rushing yards, exactly. And that's awesome. The longevity, that's Hall of Fame caliber stuff. Most players have either the quick burst, like Patrick Willis was a relatively quick burst, right? He retired at 30, but it was awesome over the short period or shorter period of time that he was in the game. Or, other Hall of Famers have the really long career and then eventually they get in. I think Frank Gore had plenty of explosiveness as well, but Jerry Rice played for how many seasons was it? Was it 20 seasons? 85 to 2004. So I believe that's 20 seasons. Jerry Rice had this insane career length combined with explosiveness all the way up until he was 40 years old. And it's he wasn't just racking up extra yardage at the end to pad his stats. He was still a 1,200 yard receiver at the age of 40, which is just absolutely crazy. And he came up big in playoff games too. Rice is at the top. We're talking about the receiver position. The 49ers, by the way, as we talk about Davante Adams and Brandon Aiyuk, they're really excited about their younger receivers. One of the guys they're excited about is Tariq Owens. Tariq Owens is Terrell Owens' son. And I mean, it's all worth talking about in context. I'll pull up the roster here in a second. Natasha has a question, though. She's been a Niners fan since Montana. Do the 49ers have a chance to get Slay since the Eagles dropped him? Well, they have a chance to get him. I don't know if they want to get Darius Slay. The Eagles essentially benched him, and they cut him post June 1st designation, so you could sign him now, but I don't think the 49ers. I mean, I think you got to bring in somebody who's still in an upswing. If you're going to pay at the cornerback position, then it's going to be somebody that you feel still has their best seasons in front of them. DJ Reed, I think, is still in his prime. We're talking about players who the 49ers are familiar with. I'm not so sure that's the case anymore with Darius Slay. Good question, though. Thank you for it. See if we have any other ones. What's the likelihood that Brandon Aiyuk gets traded? I don't think it's particularly high, but it's definitely possible. And there's that window there for it to happen. Again, the 49ers are going to be sitting here, and free agency isn't great this year. That's another thing. If you go to my roster builder, you'll see what the free agent options are. Why don't we open that right now? I think this might help answer your question, because if free agency isn't great, then the trade market value goes up, because I think that rookies and veterans are in separate pools. A team is either looking for a cost-controlled longer-term project, because you never know what rookie is going to be good and how long it's going to take for them to develop. So you either go for a cost-controlled project or you need a ready-made veteran. And if the market of ready-made veterans in free agency is not up to par, then the trade market could command greater return. So we can look at it here. Here's the roster builder. Anybody that's still not on this, you need to get on this up on the standard. The link to this is in the description. You can go to the actual roster building page. And if you go to wide receiver, for now, like I have traded Brandon Aiyuk just to illustrate how this works. Davante Adams, if released, but that probably would be expensive. You could see the cap hit would be expensive. Now, again, we don't know if there would be a discount involved. We don't know what the West Coast preference means for Davante Adams at this point. It's chatter for now. T. Higgins just got tagged, franchise tagged by the Bengals. Might a tag and trade be possible? Well, that would mean that he's expensive. That's your second best option. Chris Godwin. Now, that might be cheaper. Godwin's coming off a serious leg injury with Tampa Bay, but it's a good veteran wide receiver. But still, he's coming off a very serious injury, maybe even more serious than Brandon Aiyuk's, and he is older. Stephon Diggs, boy, has his stock dropped. I still have him as a $10 million guy, but gee, he's fallen off the radar, and he's older, that's for sure. Keenan Allen, he's older. Hollywood Brown. Amari Cooper, that's intriguing. Amari Cooper was somebody that I think the 49ers would have been happy getting him back in that potential trade with the Cleveland Browns. 2 of 5 and Amari Cooper, but Brandon Aiyuk said no at the time. Now, Brandon Aiyuk can't say no anymore. In exchange for the big signing bonus that he got with the 49ers as part of this contract, Brandon Aiyuk lost his ability to essentially veto a trade. Before he signed the deal, he had veto power because he could have said last year, I'm not signing with the Cleveland Browns. You can't trade me there. That's what Brandon Aiyuk said last year before the trade. But now that he's signed this deal, the 49ers with the $23 million signing bonus, that's been the cost of doing business. They can offload the rest of this contract, which looks like this, before April 1st, before the green column kicks in. They can offload this, and Brandon Aiyuk doesn't have veto power. The problem is he also has an ACL tear that he's recovering from. And it's hard to know how much that's going to negatively impact his market and if that's going to just make this all something that the 49ers cannot execute. But we know that they are reconsidering who entails their core. The star core of the 49ers, that is a tough group to get into, and it's a tough group to stay in. And now that they're going through this line by line, what have you done for me lately kind of thing? They're asking that question across the entire roster. There's guys that are going to be found on the outside looking in of that A-list group. That's what cost efficiency is for this football team. So there could be a little bit of buyer's remorse here, but the 49ers, again, I can't emphasize enough that they in some way anticipated that there might be, and they built that reality into the contract with the escape hatch. Only $18.4 million of dead money that has to be shouldered in 2025 because the next chunk of money for Brandon Aiyuk is not set to hit until April 1st. And that is what enough people are not talking about. That's why we have to look at this contractual stuff in detail, line by line detail. This is fascinating behavior from the 49ers. And Brandon Aiyuk wanted his money last year. He finally accepted the offer. You know, the 49ers have interesting flexibility here. Again, it's been complicated by the ACL tear, which is a trade is probably still more unlikely than it is likely, but it's certainly on the table. No, I don't know if there's a player for player trade is possible. Just keep the transactions separate unless something crazy happens in the NFL. It's really hard to match up contracts and match up year length, and it gets really complicated. It's not like the NBA where you have 4 teams involved and 8-player trades and salary dumps and guys going, I don't understand the NBA cap. I can't tell you that I understand the NFL cap. I can't tell you that a lot of people don't understand the NFL cap, which is why you have so much confusion regarding Deebo Samuel dead money, Brandon Aiyuk dead money, and the tradability of both. But what I can tell you is that the 49ers can save long-term money. A lot of it with the Brandon Aiyuk trade. They saved long-term money with the Deebo Samuel trade. They're looking for cost efficiency, and they're interested in making that receiving room as robust as possible, but on as efficient of a price as possible moving forward. Here's a good question. Do the faithful care about keeping the boombox walkout? Can I make a poll? Sorry. I can't make a poll. No, I can't do that. But can I make a poll and see if people actually care about the boombox walkout? Mike, can we make a poll on this, on the super chat or on the YouTube? Can you do that? Can I do that? I don't know if I can do that from where I am. Yeah. Mike, please make the poll. Mike is working on it. Mike is going to put a poll up on the screen. So thanks for the question. Appreciate it. Stay tuned, everybody. Don't sign off. We got an important poll coming up on if the 49ers should keep the boombox walkout now that Deebo Samuel is not there with Trent Williams to lead the 49ers out. But there is a Brandon Aiyuk trade window. It 100% is there. Whether or not it happens, I don't know. I'm not afraid to say I don't know. But I am here to inform you as much as I can. I'm waiting. Mike, let me know when that is up there. I'm keeping an eye on the show here on my phone. Okay, he created the poll. Is it visible? Because I can't see it. Maybe it is. Okay, he says it's up. You guys can vote. I just can't see it on my end. So you guys can go ahead and vote. Tell me if you see it. Okay, good. It's live. Reggie says it's live. Do you want the 49ers to perpetuate the boombox walkout? Yes or no? Oh, it's part of the live chat. I see. So the results are coming in. Mike is going to be sending me the results as they come in. I'm going to try to open them one more time, but I don't know if that's going to be possible. I'm trying to do it on my phone here. Yeah, I can't see my own poll, Mike. But you can see it, so you could send me the results on this thing. How many people have voted? Update. With 158 votes in, 66% say yes. So we got 66-34, and I guess that 2%. No, actually, sorry. 66 plus 34 is 100. That's a good sign that I should probably end the show. I'm not ending yet, but if I can't even add up 66 and 34, I thought 66 plus 34 was 98 when I first looked at it. Probably means that I'm fried at this point. He's cooked. He's done. He's like any other receiver past the age of 32. Send me one more update, Mike, in like a minute, and that will be our final result. I'll put it up on the screen. Math is tough sometimes. That sure is right. Brandon Aiyuk did tweet today. He's in New York City. That's one of the parts of our update. Here you guys go. That's the Brandon Aiyuk tweet from NYC. Or I think it's an Instagram post, but it was repurposed for Twitter. And I think that we've got a decent sample right now of the poll. So I'm going to get this up on the screen for everybody. What do you guys think? What do you guys think the final number is going to be? You probably see it. So maybe this whole guessing game is kind of silly on my part, but it's still fun to look at. Oh, Mike is cutting it up for us. All right. I'm going to answer a question while we wait for Mike to do this. Mike, cut it up for us. Drum roll, please. We're getting it out. Do you like the boombox walkout? Was the question that Mike asks. With 206 votes, the answer is yes. 65% say yes. 34% say no. Now, that doesn't add up to 100. Even right now, even with me, I'm not very good at math. I can tell that doesn't add up to 100. That adds up to 99. So 1% of you are undecided, or it's just a rounding error. Anyway, it's time for everybody to go build their rosters. There's the spreadsheet. There's the cool little animation they created at the San Francisco Standard. Link is up on my X page, and it's also in the description. Go subscribe to the YouTube. Go do it whatever you need to, and then build your roster. Sign Amari Cooper. Trade Brandon Aiyuk. Sign Davante Adams. I know that he wants to play on the West Coast, and he has been released, by the way. So I will make the change on the roster builder spreadsheet so you can not have to see if released. Build your team. Take a screenshot. This is important. If you want to be the internet GM of the year, you absolutely must take a screenshot and send it to me on X at Lombardi himself. And then I'm going to be taking a look at the best teams, and you will be awarded the internet GM of the year on the San Francisco Standard, like in written form. You could print out the article. You could put it up in your office so your boss can see that you're making good use of your time at work, or you're invited onto the show. You'll be interviewed here probably later this week, maybe next week, whenever I have time, the internet GM of the year. I might wait till free agency gets going, because maybe one of the criteria that I'll have to determine how good these rosters are if you can predict what the 49ers are going to do. If you can go to the roster builder and predict what they're going to do, and then we'll see in free agency what they actually do, and the two match up, you're definitely going to be one of our internet GMs of the year, and you can join the show from the comfort of your living room. Anyway, that's the Brandon Aiyuk trade window. Hopefully you learned something today. The Davante Adams release adds another intriguing possibility. It's going to be a fun month, so hit that subscribe button, hit the like button. If you enjoy the show, that helps us out a lot. So take the time right now to hit that like. There are over 1,000 of you in here, so I would like to see our sub count go up by over 1,000 at this point. That'd be nice. Do it right now. I'm serious. Do it. We'll see you later.